So we are saying that number one, we said excellence is going the second mile. Number two, excellence is the character to give more than the world demands. Excellence is the character to give more than the world demands. Now, we are going to go a little bit fast here because time is not on our side. So I want us to go to the book of Matthew chapter number 5. Once again, Matthew chapter number 5. Verse number 41 in the New Living Translation this time. Matthew chapter number 5 verse 41, the New Living Translation, the Bible says, if a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. This is what we are saying. He says, if a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. He said, when a soldier comes, if a soldier comes and says, carry my gear for 1 mile, Jesus said, excellence is carrying it for 2 miles. That is what excellence is. It is carrying it for 2 miles. It is carrying it more than the demand of a soldier. Now, the first mile, as we said, is obligation and fear. The second mile is voluntary choice. The first mile is the required standard baseline. The second mile is the expected surplus. The first mile is a mindset that says, what do I have to do? That is the first mile. The first mile is that mindset that says, what do I have to do? The second mile is a mindset that says, what more can I do? The first mile mindset says, what do I have to do? The second mile mindset says, what more can I do? So in the first mile, the soldier is in control, but in the second mile, you are in control. In the second mile, you become in charge and you become in control. You take control, you take full authority. In the first mile, the soldier is in authority and is in control, but in the second mile, you take authority, you come in control. So this is the Matthew chapter number 5 verse 41. If a soldier compels to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. And that is why, today we say somebody has reached a milestone. That word milestone comes from the Greek word for mile. That is where it comes from, because milestone is a compound word. In other words, it is a combination of 2 words. It is a combination of the word mile and the word stone, milestone. So when somebody says they have reached a milestone, we know that they are talking about, they are talking about a great achievement. Maybe they received their first certificate, they got their first certificate, or their first bachelor's, or something like that. They call that a milestone. We call that a milestone because it's a great achievement. Now, for us to understand this milestone and how it came to be a milestone, in the Roman time, because we are talking about the Roman time now, the time of Jesus. When Jesus came, the Roman Empire was in authority. So in the Roman time, especially when they built roads, what they did was that every mile they would put a stone. After every mile, they would count 1,000 paces or 2,000 steps and put a stone, a very big stone or a rock, and then after another mile, another stone. So every mile was marked. Those stones they put became markers, and that is why I'm talking about the word milestone. I said it's a compound word. That's why we call it a milestone. So when a Jew was compelled, they knew that all they needed to do was to carry that burden, for until they reached where the other marker was, where the other stone was, which was a milestone. So when they reached where the other stone was, they would then put down their burden. But the Bible tells us, Jesus is saying, when you reach the first milestone, don't stop there, go beyond. Everybody else wants the first milestone, but Jesus says go beyond that. So now let's look at another example of a person that walked in excellence, and this is Rebekah. When we read the book of Genesis chapter number 24, let's go to Genesis chapter number 24. Genesis chapter number 24 verse 17. Once again, you can read in your own time. This was when Abraham was old. His son Isaac needed a wife. So Abraham tells his servant, he says, go to my people and get a wife for my son Isaac. And he gave him specific instructions. So when the servant went to look for a wife for his master's son, the servant made a prayer. He said, Lord, whoever is going to attend to me when I ask for water, and they are going to give also to my camels, that one is going to be a sign of my master's son's wife. So the Bible tells us in verse 17, you can read from verse 1 in your time. Verse 17, the Bible says, and the servant ran to meet her and said, this is Rebekah. The servant ran to meet her and said, please let me drink a little water from your pitcher. Let me drink a little water from a pitcher. She was carrying a bucket of water. This was 8 in the morning, carrying a bucket of water. But when the servant observed her, he saw her, she drew water from the well. And then as she carried that water, the servant went to her and said, let me drink a little bit of water. He was asking for water. He said, give me some water to drink. Now look at what happened in verse number 18. So she said, drink my Lord, drink my Lord. Now this is the best line, because in Bible times, giving somebody a cup of water was the best line in terms of showing hospitality. So she said, drink my Lord. Then she quickly let her pitcher down. Look at her, look at what she's doing. She quickly let her pitcher down. He says, then she quickly laid her pitcher down to her hand and gave him a drink. He gave him a drink. Now, you and I know that when it comes to water, probably all he needed was 500 mils, or 750 mils if he was very thirsty. That is all he needed. He just needed some water to quench his thirst. So she gave him that water, but the Bible tells us that she went an extra mile. Verse number 19, it says, and when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking. Now I want you to notice, she said, I will not only give you water, you asked for water, you ask for water for yourself, but I'm going to go an extra mile and give also your camels water. Now, I want you to think about it. Now, these camels, just to make you understand, these camels, the Bible tells us there were 10 camels. Now, 10 camels don't drink water like human beings. A camel does not drink water like human beings. A camel drinks a lot of water. A human being can drink maybe up to 1 liter. Let's just say 1 liter, at a go. You drink 1 liter. If you want, you can go 2 liters, but the more water you drink, the more dangerous it becomes. But let's just say 1 liter. If you take 1 liter, if you take 1 liter at a go because you are very thirsty, so you take 1 liter of water, at a go. But a camel, when a camel is thirsty, a camel is able to drink up to 200 liters of water. One camel, 200 liters of water. So I want you to understand what Rebekah was offering to do. The servant asked for 1 liter of water, a water for himself alone, but the servant but Rebekah said, I'm going to not only give you that 1 liter, but I'm also going to give 200 liters of water to each of your camels. That would make it 1,000 liters of water. Think about it. Okay, this is the Bible. I want you to think about it. She offered herself to give. This was hard work. This was hard work. She offered herself to go an extra mile. Rebekah offered herself to go an extra mile. Now, that 1 liter, if you know that 1 liter of water is equal to 1 kg. 1 liter, when you take 1 liter of water, it weighs 1 kg. So 200 liters of water weighs 200 kg. Now, I want you to think about it. Rebekah was saying, I'm going to draw 200 kg of water. We know water is in liters, but it weighs 200 kg. She said, I'm going to draw 200 liters of water for each of your camels. There were 10, which made it 1,000 kg. I want you to think about it. If you talk about excellence, that is excellence. You talk about going beyond, that is going beyond. Rebekah went beyond. She did over and above what was asked of her, and because of that, we know what happened. She eventually became the wife of Isaac, and we know the line of Isaac, We know what happened. So what we are saying is that Rebekah had a spirit of excellence in her, and that is why she was able to do and to go beyond what was required of her, beyond what was asked of her. Number 3, last point.